Hi guys, welcome to Learn Tech from Zero. Today we will be covering more CCNA topics. So today's topic is access points. If you'd like to know more about other topics, you can find them on YouTube, TikTok, and on our website, which is learntechfromzero.com. And slowly we will have them available on all other social media platforms as well. So let's start with today's topic, which is access points. So what is an access point? So an access point is a device that lets wireless devices, phones, laptop, etc. connect to a wired network. An access point is a device that provides Wi-Fi connectivity. It connects to the wired network using an Ethernet cable. Phone, laptops, tablets connect to the access point using Wi-Fi. So basically, an access point is just a device where Wi-Fi enabled devices can connect to. So, for example, you don't get access points um, in normal environment. Like you wouldn't get them at home environment because at home your router acts as the router, acts as a switch, and also acts as a access point. But we are talking about a separate access point. So let me give an example. Like if you go to, so access points are mainly used in separate access points. Like just their purpose is just the access points for internet. So you get this kind of devices. Like for example, you might see these kind of devices on walls in different businesses or enterprises or big corporations or whatever. So where for example at the airport, or let's say in a school or university environment. So what happens is when you connect to an access point, so basically when you connect to the internet, you are connecting to an access point. And then when you move around, if this connection to this access point gets weaker, then you connect to a separate access point in that area. So access points are really good for accessing internet, and your internet connection will remain stable, and the internet will be accessible from different areas using access point. So for example, at home, your home router is a router, is also a switch, and is also an access point. So basically, when you are close to the router, and or maybe a you are next door, or let's say you are upstairs, you can still access your internet. Uh, Basically, if it has Wi-Fi connection, you can connect through Wi-Fi to your router to access internet. But for example, if you leave um, home, the connection, you will not be within the range. The connection is not there. So this is where access points come in. For example, you can have access points installed in separate rooms and like in big areas, and your internet connection will remain stable, and you will be connected to the internet wherever you go. So for example, if you're, let's say you are connected to an access point internet where you are in one room and you connected to this one, and then you move to a separate room, it will automatically disconnect from this one and it will connect to a separate one in a different area. That's what access point is, because they carry the same configurations. So if you're connected to an Wi-Fi which is connected to an access point, it will automatically switch to different access points. I will cover more about access points now, so if you're confused, don't worry about it now. So so that's what an access point is. It's a separate device. Your home router is an access point itself, right? But if you leave home, you will not be able to connect to your home router because it's not spread within a big area or a big space using access points like a separate access points. So their purpose is to just provide you internet. That's it. They don't do any sort of routing or switching work. So if you don't know what if you don't know how routers or switches work, you should check our other videos. If you don't know about these ones, routers, switches, and next generation firewalls and IPS, then you should check our other videos. All right, let's just keep it very simple. Okay, so an access point is a device. It plugs into a switch or a router with an Ethernet cable. It creates Wi-Fi, so phones, laptops, tablets can join the network. That's it, nothing more. So let me just explain you the whole home router and access point example. Like for example, your home router, right? It's directly connected using, most probably using, and because right now people use fiber optic in most of the places. So your router must be connected directly using a fiber optic cable, and then you are accessing, and then it has the Wi-Fi capability. So you can connect using Wi-Fi, and then everything goes through the fiber optic cable. But access point, they are not connected to directly to a fiber optic or directly to the internet provider. So an access point is usually connected to a Ethernet port. So like this. So Ethernet port. So and then let's say it's connected to one of the Ethernet ports, and the connection from that port will be to the main switch and the router. So you normally get access internet using access points, which is usually connected to a switch and a router, and that switch and the router is connected to the internet provider. So when you use an access point to get the wireless service, right, the whole setup is still wired, because that access point is connected directly to a switch and a router, and then the communication goes through different mediums. So the access point is basically for devices who or for basically it's mainly for wireless connectivity to the internet. So for example, you might have so let's say your workplace has both Ethernet connection, where you can use internet directly using the Ethernet port, or you can or there is Wi-Fi, and basically there are so many access points that it's such a big area that wherever you go, your Wi-Fi remains stable. Your connection is still there. It's because of access point. So if you are not using internet through the Ethernet port, then you are using the access points where the access point is directly connected to one of those ports. So the whole basically the whole setup where you are connecting to access points and you are accessing internet and Wi-Fi, everything is still connected to a switch and a router. Okay, that's that. So this is what it is in simple terms. If you're confused, just leave a message and I will explain it to you. Okay, there are so router, switch, and access points. You can read about them if you want to know more of how they differentiate. So there are two kind of access points, and stand-alone access point work on its own, configured individually, good for small networks. Like there might be just a few, one or two access points where you have to configure them directly. So you basically connect it to a switch or a router, and then you have to configure it using the device. Like you have to do it within the device. You don't control it with the software or a separate hardware. So that's like one type of access point where you have to configure it directly within the access point. So you configure it within itself. Or there is another access point called controller based access point. So controlled by a wireless LAN controller. So basically when you have a lot of access points that you need to control, then what normally happens is you would need a software wireless LAN controller or a hardware. So a WLC, a wireless LAN controller, it can control a lot of access points using a software or using a hardware. Like you can have a software or you can have a separate device which is just for controlling these access points. So a WLC can be a software, can be a hardware. Settings are pushed, so you can apply settings are pushed through to all APs from this place, so you can manage and control everything. This is normally used in large enterprises. Like for example, if you go to an airport, right, and if when you go to different areas, but you are still connected to the internet, because they use a controller based access point, and they normally use a software or a dedicated device that they can control all these access points from. So how a access point is connected, I've already explained to you. It's normally, access point is usually connected to a switch and the router. So it's connected using an Ethernet port, and sometimes you don't need to plug them directly to the power socket. Like you don't need to give them power, because you can most of the access points, or the modern access points, those devices, they can get their power using an Ethernet cable. So uh, and that feature is called PoE. So some switch ports, like on the back of the switches, like for example, let me just show you. Like for example, let's see if this one is, let me just show you. PoE Ethernet port. So PoE switch. So for example, some of the switches, like there are, in modern networking, a switch has different ports. So some of them have PoE enabled, some of them don't. So what PoE means, power over an Ethernet. So for example, an access point, they normally don't need to be connected directly to the power, but you can give them the electricity, the power, using the Ethernet port. So if the switch port has PoE on top of that, which means this switch port can give electricity, like the power, uh, used through the Ethernet port. And then this is how the access points get their power. So they are normally connected using an Ethernet port, and that Ethernet port is connected to a PoE port, and at the end of the router, or a switch. And so they don't need to be connected to the power directly. They can get their electricity from the Ethernet cable. Wireless devices connect to access point using Wi-Fi. That's the whole purpose of these access points, because you connect so that you have Wi-Fi enabled service in your area. So access points are there for connecting wireless devices to the wired network. So the whole network is a wired network. For example, your switch is connected to the router. Your router is connected to the internet provider. So that's the actual setup. But Wi-Fi is basically is there to make sure that you connect to. So basically, you are able to use your wireless devices to access the internet. So there are some wireless standards that people need to follow. You need to understand these. So what are wireless standards? So wireless standards, I have explained a bit about wireless standards here. So basically, when different manufacturers or companies, when they make new devices, they have to follow those standards. So when for example, let's say when a company makes a device which has 802.11.g, and another company follows the same standard, then their devices can communicate with each other. So that's the whole purpose of wireless standards. So wireless standards, there are rules and guidelines that defines how Wi-Fi should work. And then who makes these standards? The IEE, Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. So they make those standards. Why do they make those standards? So that all the vendors, all the different companies would make Wi-Fi differently, Sorry, without standards everyone would, oh yeah, without the standards everyone would have made their devices differently, and it would have, all the devices would have functioned differently. But when we have a standard, no matter if it's a Samsung phone, if it's a HP laptop or whatever it is, they will follow the same standards for connecting to the internet. So you need to know those standards. Like for example, when a device is has a standard, so for example 802.11a, so all wireless devices, they follow 802.11 standard, but there are different standards available. So how those devices work differently, like some of them can be 5 gigahertz, or some of them can be 2.4. Some of them is for some of the new devices will have the latest standard. So you know what I mean. So you don't need to know too much about those standards, but you just need to know what standards are. So standards are basically when different um, um, companies, when they make something, all the devices can communicate with each other because they follow the same standards. So this is what Wi-Fi standards are. Okay, and let's just see what else we should to know. Just also, okay, there are different types of there are different modes of access points. Like when you have an access point like this, uh, they can function in different ways. Like for example, one of the main function is the root mode. So when it's in the root mode, that's where you connect to the internet. So when you're at the airport, or when you're in a big enterprise or big company and you're using their internet, they those when you connect to the Wi-Fi, that device is in the root mode. So it's just for connecting to the normal internet. And access point can also be a repeater mode. So basically this access point is connected to a different, let's say for example let's just say you have a home router, and you can actually install an access point, and that access point can connect to your home router. So at your home you will have two separate access points. So that process is called repeater. So you are just repeating the internet from the main source. So that access point can be the main internet provider where it's connected directly to the switch, or it is directly to connected to the another wireless solution where it's just repeating the internet for you. So when you connect to this one, it then passes to the main wireless device, and then it connects to the internet. So there are different modes. So these are the two modes. These are the main two modes for accessing internet, and these two modes are for different purposes. Bridge mode, it connects two different networks wirelessly. So let me just show you one second. Bridge mode. Just let me just see if there are more information about them. Hold on a second. So yeah, for simple rule is basically bridge mode and work group bridge are for network to network connection. So it's not for, so basically connecting separate networks, so that those networks can communicate with each other, and they can form a one big network. You don't need to know too much about them. You just need to know work bridge groups is basically, you don't connect them. It's only wired devices behind it use it. So basically, maybe a lot of devices are connected to this access point, and then there is another access point in a different building, and those two access points are connected using a work group bridge or bridge mode. If you don't understand them, you don't need to know too much of it in details. You just need to know that they have different access point modes. So the for accessing internet is root mode and repeater mode, and to connect different networks, you need a work group bridge or bridge mode. So these are the four main modes that the access points can be. Let's just see. So security, like you, there are a lot of standards that we follow in access points. So for example, an open Wi-Fi is there is no password, so it's not secure, you know. And there is another way. Security is WEP security. It's one of those really old security that we hardly use right now. So, for example, you can see that when you're connecting to a wireless device, you might be using a WPA or W2PA2. That's the most common security, and then WPA3. So these are the three types of security when connecting to a wireless access point. And we'll be explaining them later on. If I start explaining now, it's going to get too long. So normally these are the different kind of securities that we use to connect to the Wi-Fi, and those securities, they make sure that the connection between you and the access point is reliable. And if a hacker hacks into the information is not clear enough for them, so they use security encryption, hashing, where all the information is encrypted and stuff like that. So we will be covering them later on. And there is enterprise. There is another way of doing enterprise mode in security, which normally they use a separate server. It's a radius server where people will have to authenticate using maybe a ID, password, digital signatures. Don't worry about this too much for now. Just this is just for general understanding. Mm, let's see if there is anything else that I need to cover. I have written a lot of information about access points on the website. It's not, it's basically I'm trying to answer as many questions as possible just to make sure that everybody can understand. If you guys have any questions, make sure that you leave a comment, or if you go to the website, you will have a lot of scenarios explained. Not everything is related to the CCNA exam. This is more to do with general understanding, but this is all extensive information about access points, and it can give you a really good understanding of how access points work. I don't want to go too much in details about access points because the video is going to get too long. But if you guys have any questions, make sure to leave a comment, and I will try my best to explain it to you in very simple ways. My aim is to teach everyone all kind of IT concepts in very simple way so that everyone can understand. And I always repeat myself, and I try to use very basic English. If you like my content, I would really appreciate if you can give me a follow. And I will be back with the next topic, which will be controllers, in the next video. So thanks for your time, and I will see you soon.